In terms of the case studies for illegal wildlife trade, I'd like to talk a little bit about tigers. There's 9 subspecies of tigers. All of them are either endangered, critically endangered, or extinct. And the tiger that I have in most of my pictures today is the Bengal tiger or Indian tiger, because I did a trip to India to photograph tigers several years ago. A century ago, 100,000 tigers roamed the Asian continent. They've disappeared from 93% of their historical range. And the Bengal tiger, or the Indian tiger, is listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List. This is a picture from National Geographic showing the current distribution of tigers, and here you can see them in India. And also northeastern India in a park called Kaziranga. Here you can see in Southeast Asia, they once had tigers in Laos, and then tigers in Russia. So anyway, again, 100 years ago, we had 100,000 tigers in the world, and now it's estimated somewhere between 3,000 and 3,200 tigers. The 2 biggest threats to tigers today are poaching and loss of habitat. Poaching has substantially increased in recent years due to high prices paid for tiger bone, which is used in traditional Chinese medicine. About 20% or 1/5 of the world's population believes that swallowing ground tiger bone cures muscle pain and epilepsy. And in fact, here's a chart that shows tiger parts used. Claws are used to treat insomnia. Bones are for arthritis, headache, and dysentery. The tail is for skin diseases. The teeth for fever. Bile for convulsions. Blood for willpower. So anyway, lots of different uses of tiger parts in traditional Chinese medicine. And traditional Chinese medicine, you can buy components for it in large cities all over the world, such as New York City, San Francisco, Toronto, Vancouver, and then, of course, other Asian cities. The appetite for animal parts in traditional Chinese medicine has skyrocketed in tandem with China's expanding industrialization. More people have money. And the demand for the most highly prized items, including rhino horn, pangolin scales, and tiger parts, has nearly hunted these creatures off the planet. And so prices for tigers continue to soar as populations collapse. Poaching for traditional Chinese medicine, and to a lesser degree for their skins, has been the primary threat to their survival. But in India, habitat loss is also a huge issue. Tigers have 3 basic needs: food, water, and cover. And half of all wild tigers live in India, where 1.2 billion people register 60,000 births a day. When I was in India, no matter how remote we were, we could not get away from people. There were people everywhere. It was mind-boggling. So when I went to India, I visited these tiger reserves in central India, and then also went to another park in northeastern India, mainly to see the Indian one-horned rhinoceros, but this park is also really good tiger habitat. India has over 250 million domesticated cattle and 120 million goats and sheep. And of course, all of these animals require land to graze. They require habitat. And so these livestock are displacing tigers from their habitat. The tiger reserves are highly protected, though, and it's basically the only place in India you can see tigers in the wild. This is a picture of Bandhavgarh National Park. In this park, we did 80 hours of jeep safari. We had very few minutes of tiger encounter, but we did get an opportunity to see tigers when we were there. Wild tigers only flourish if everything else from ungulates to plants is okay. And so if you have tigers in an area, it tells you the ecosystem is in pretty good shape. And how you find tigers is when you're in the jeeps, you have spotters that are looking for what are called pug marks, which are tiger tracks. And then they're listening for alarm calls from the animals in the forest that are letting other animals know that there's a tiger in the area. Because, of course, the tiger is the apex predator in these forests. And so in this park, we saw lots of tiger prey. We saw spotted deer, barasingha, gaur, wild boars. And if tigers need a healthy ungulate prey base, recall that ungulates are hoofed animals, and tiger prey is under heavy human subsistence hunting pressure outside the reserves. And so our first tiger that we saw in Bandhavgarh, we had less than 1 minute of tiger, but it is absolutely a thrill to see these animals in the wild. And there's Roy Toft, who we talked about in terms of being a member of the International League of Conservation Photographers and involved in a project photographing the border wall. And he's giving me tips on photographing tigers while we're on this trip. So again, another picture the next day of Bandhavgarh National Park. And again, we had several tiger sightings in this park, and it really is a thrill. This is a huge animal. These animals will attack humans, and so we were not allowed out of the jeeps when we were in the park. And notice it looks like eyes on the back of the ears, sort of as a protective mechanism. We also had a chance to see some of the guards. The guards are very important to combat poaching, and they're very dedicated to the parks that they work in. They live away from their families for months at a time. They're on duty 24/7 in isolated, primitive anti-poaching camps. Where they're living, they lack access to plumbing. They cook over open fires. They're paid very little, and a lot of them are killed doing their job. Approximately 50 are killed every year and 100 mutilated, protecting not just animals, but trees against illegal loggers. You've seen this image before. Here we are inside the park. Here is the buffer area outside the park. And then an aerial view of the area inside the park, the buffer area, and then the village outside the park. The people that live outside the park are subsistence farmers, and here you can see a wheat crop. These people work very hard. They're trying to make a living. They're trying to feed their families. They invited me into their home, and I got a chance to photograph the families and actually sent photographs back. And to protect their wheat crop, they create this raised structure called a machan. And the farmer one night will spend the night awake in here chasing animals out of his fields. And then the wife will spend the next night. And so when the crops are growing, every other night, these people are up 24 hours a day trying to protect their crops from the ungulates. And again, those ungulates are the food source for the tigers in the reserve. This is a picture of the park that is in the northeastern part. It's called Kaziranga National Park. It's not only a tiger reserve, but it also has a very healthy population of the Indian rhinoceros, or the greater one-horned rhinoceros. And here's a picture where it's located in the northeastern portion of India near the Himalaya below Tibet. And so the park sits on the boundary of this river that floods during the monsoon season. And that flooding brings a bunch of silt and and nutrients to the area that borders the river. So you have really high quality habitat for ungulates, which means you have a large population of hoofed animals and a large population of tigers in the area. And so again, here is a picture of the boundary of the park. Here's a road outside the park. During the monsoon season, animals migrate outside the park. And basically, it's a hub and a network of migration corridors that supports a crucial breeding population of tigers. So tigers will migrate out of the park and exchange genes with other populations of tigers that are located near the Himalaya. And then here is an aerial photograph, and here's the Brahmaputra River that again during the monsoon season floods. Here you can see the park that's protected, and then here you can see farms and fields right up to the river. And so Kaziranga is a conservation success story. Today, or at least in the 2010 census, there were over 2,290 greater one-horned rhinoceroses. A century ago, there were only 200. And so it's one of the few places in the world where rhinos are increasing. And then a number of other species have increased due to protection of that particular park. We were there not to see tigers. Tigers are hard to see because the vegetation is so high in this area. But we were there to see rhinos, and the rhinos are quite dangerous, and so the way to see them is either from jeep or elephant. And so there is a picture of me out in the morning just at sunrise photographing rhinos in Kaziranga. Kaziranga houses over 70% of the remaining one-horned rhinos that exist today. It's a small park, as you saw from the aerial photographs, so any catastrophic event, such as disease or civil disorder, poaching, or habitat loss, would have a devastating impact on the status of this species. The two main threats to this rhino are poaching and increasing human population density. The rhino is classified by the IUCN Red List as being vulnerable to extinction. Originally, it was threatened with extinction, but the numbers have increased. But the threats do include poaching, diseases spread by domestic wildlife, conflicts with humans, they're seen as agricultural pests, illegal grazing in the park, and inbreeding. And then again, the horn is used in traditional Chinese medicine, and a single horn can fetch $30,000 on the black market. There are 600 guards, and when we were driving around in jeeps, we had an armed guard with us. It's one of the few places, it is actually the only place in India where guards are allowed to shoot poachers, shoot poachers if they are seen. And so there's about 130 anti-poaching camps. And from 1985, this is the only statistics I could find, 1985 to 2005, illegal hunters shot 447 Kaziranga rhinos and several guards. But the guards have killed 90 poachers and arrested 663. And so anyway, Kaziranga is known both for a high tiger population density, as well as a stronghold, basically the last stronghold for the Indian one-horned rhinoceros.